Hi everyone, Ben Dinnery from Premier Injuries. Myself and Johnny have been chatting and thought now would be a good opportunity to give you a bit of an update and a little bit of insight into the injury with regards to Christian Eriksen, because there's been a lot said in the press over the last sort of few days and weeks, so we just wanted to sort of clarify where we are with regards to that injury. So what I'll do is I'll give you a little bit of a timeline. I'll bring us up to speed in how we arrived at this position, and then Johnny will come in and tell you a little bit about maybe sort of the medical issues that could be going on and potential timelines on a return. So Eriksen completed 90 minutes back in game week 6 against Brighton. There weren't any known issues at that point. It wasn't until the press conference ahead of the Carabao Cup tie with Watford that Tottenham actually announced that Eriksen had been ruled out, and they quoted that as a minor abdomen problem, and there was very little with regards to further information. There was no specifics about that. However, there was a general feeling that he could possibly return against Huddersfield in the Premier League, or if he missed that game, maybe the Champions League against Barcelona. As it transpired, Eriksen actually missed both of those games, and information was released that he wouldn't be back before the international break. Now, the Danish coach, in a press conference ahead of the upcoming games in the Nations League, actually said, "Look, I'm not going to contact Tottenham. I know he's sidelined, but there is still hope that he may." Play for the national team. He could potentially join us in Dublin ahead of the game with the Republic of Ireland. And that in itself suggested that it was a bit of a minor issue. It was touch and go, certainly nothing to say that it was long term. As the game approached, Agi Haraldsson came out, and this is where the issue and the problems have sort of cropped up over the last couple of days. He essentially confirmed that Eriksen wouldn't be joining the squad and wouldn't be part of those games, and the reasons he gave that were that potentially if he did, it could exacerbate any problem that he had, and it can turn out to be a chronic injury. Now, somewhere along the line, the can was forgotten about, and everybody seemed to sort of focus and hone in on this word chronic, suggesting that Eriksen was out with some kind of long-term injury. The outcome of that, and it sort of merited and elicited a response from his agent to come out and say, look, he has no chronic injury, it's fatigue related, he's resting, and time is actually going to heal that problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand you over to Johnny. He'll tell you a little bit about what it actually means to have a chronic injury or acute problem, and also maybe look at some of the issues that it could potentially be. What we know is it's stomach inflammation, or as that's been reported. But to tell us a little bit more, here's Johnny Wilson.
Hi guys, I hope you're all well, and thanks a million for that introduction, Ben. That's really useful. So abdominal strains in professional football, and if we look at Eriksen in particular, so abdominal injuries, they're very frequent, and it's not surprising really given the nature of professional football or any type of football. The activities that players are expected to carry out are explosive activities, so you've got changing direction, cutting, turning, twisting, jumping maximally, high speed running, kicking the ball maximally. These will all cause pressure and strain on the abdominal muscles. And these can range from a contact injury, which might cause some superficial bruising around the muscles of the stomach, to a simple abdominal strain, which usually recovers pretty well. But also they can range all the way up to life-threatening conditions such as internal bleeding, which obviously we need to be very wary. Now, if we move back to a simple abdominal strain, well, this certainly has the potential to propagate, so to get worse. So it could turn into where you get a hernia, which is like a split in the abdominal of the abdominal muscles. And what happens when you're carrying out high explosive activities is that the contents of the abdomen can actually push through the abdominal muscles, and that's what's called a hernia. So you've got a split within the actual wall of the muscle. These injuries around the abdomen, they can be particularly challenging to treat. Number one is because they're very hard to assess, so it's very hard to kind of pick out one structure in particular which might be causing the symptoms, because you've got all these muscles that are coming down here. They all go into around the pubic bones, your pubic area, and some clinicians would term it like spaghetti junction, so everything is coming in. It's a bit of a mishmash down there. So given that, it's not surprising that some of these abdominal issues can turn into chronic issues. Now, a chronic issue is usually termed as pain that's been there for quite a while. So depending on the situation and on the environment and on the industry, usually after about 12 weeks we're looking at pain that's chronic. So it's persistent, it's there for a long time, and it doesn't seem to ease up with conservative management. So conservative management being physiotherapy, whereas an acute symptoms will be those that have just happened. So something like pulling your hamstring, or maybe breaking your leg or spraining your ankle. In the immediate days and weeks post this, we would call this acute. So the player is in acute rehab, in early rehab, or it's an acute injury, it's just happened. So going back to assessment, these usually will occur with a full thorough examination from the physio, from the sports medicine department. They usually have a scan on this, so they may have an MRI scan to check around the pelvic area to see how the muscles and tendons are attaching into the pelvis itself. They'll use a diagnostic ultrasonography scan, which is very sensitive for picking up hernias, so any kind of split within the abdominal muscles. These hernias can be true hernias or incipient hernias. So incipient hernias where you've got some insufficiency rather than actual tear within the abdominal wall. And quite often after examination and after thorough imaging, it's not uncommon not to find any structural damage, to find any type of issues. Sometimes you'll find what's called inflammation or inflammatory markers around where the muscles attach into the pelvis. And if that's there, what happens usually is they may be given an injection to help settle down those symptoms. If that doesn't help, then they might go to the likes of Simon Marsh down in London, or other surgeons to investigate a little bit further to see if there's any type of surgery that can be done to help with the symptoms. So in general, players don't report any symptoms on low-level activities like jogging or changing direction nice and easy, or short passing, but it's when they come to running maximally or striking the ball maximally or turning explosively that they just say, look, I just can't get on with this. Every time I do this activity I feel my pain. I think I need this investigated a little bit more. And these are activities that will stop you doing the job that you're meant to do as a professional footballer. So, nobody goes out to play at 80% or 90%. These guys go out eyeballs out. They go out at 110%. So it's fairly important that they're able to do that in a pain-free manner. So there's been some speculation around fatigue causing the abdominal injury, which is very plausible given the fact that Eriksen has played in the World Cup. He's had very little rest between the end of last season and the start of this season. He's obviously played, they did very well in the World Cup as well. He's had a lack of a pre-season. So all those are certainly risk factors and can lead to fatigue. I suppose the confounding aspect here is that the abdominals are the second most aerobic muscle group in the body, so they're quite resistant to fatigue. So it's usually other reasons why guys get pain in the abdomen. So in essence, what we're really saying here is abdominal injuries are hard to assess, they're hard to diagnose. There's no gold standard when it comes to imaging or assessment. Some guys do respond to conservative management. Some guys need to do end up going to surgery pretty quick, so they've got a low tolerance level for rehabilitation from a physiotherapy point of view. Abdominal injuries can range from simple contact or simple bruising to life-threatening injuries. Usually in professional football we're looking at overload of the abdominal muscles, possibly because of weakness of the adductor muscles, so the muscles around the legs, and these cause a little bit of a pulling around that sensation. But there's no consensus in the literature, and every player's got to be taken on an individualized basis. All I would say is that he's at a very good football club with a very respected sports medicine team who would have looked down all the avenues, and again, the decision either to return to train or not to return to train or not to return to play would have been a multidisciplinary decision led by the player, and in making informed decisions from the sports medicine staff for sure. So I hope that little insight into abdominal injuries in professional football helps, guys. Love to hear your thoughts. I'm just going to hand you back over to Ben. Ben, thanks for the intro again, and over to you.
Thanks, Johnny. Excellent insight as always. So just a quick recap. Abdominal injuries, quite a common problem in football. That's due to the very nature of the sport, quick changing in directions, high intensity, explosive movements. Specific issues around the abdomen can be quite difficult to pinpoint and nail down the symptoms. And need to be managed very carefully, particularly in the case with Eriksen. What we're looking at, maybe, you know, there's no definitive timeline at this moment. And that's because, you know, they don't want to exacerbate any problem there and maybe cause a tear in the abdominal wall, which will cause a hernia. But the good news, and from what Johnny was saying, it certainly doesn't look as if it's a chronic problem at this stage. We're in the acute phase. It's only been a number of weeks since that initially happened. So if you like the video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to hear from me and Johnny again, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully we'll be back very soon with another injury update. Thanks again.